Hey, is this Parker?
This is Parker.
Hey, it's Garrett with the Smoky Mountain News. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, man?
Good. Where are you speaking from?
I am in my backyard in Nashville, Tennessee.
All right. How's the weather out there today?
It's overcast and warm. Yeah, no, it feels pretty good outside. We're here before too long. We're going to get on the road to D.C. We got a show there tomorrow night.
Yeah. Well, I guess just to start, you've always been very well known for your acoustic stylings and acoustic performances, but I want to say, like, the new album, you really come out of the gates hard with that electric guitar. Was that a subconscious thing or a conscious thing in terms of that's the statement out of the gate?
I think conscious, but not as like a statement. Conscious as in it's an exciting way to start the record.
Yeah.
But the intent wasn't like, I'm electric now, bitches. That wasn't what I was trying to say.
Well, you definitely...
Because there's acoustic stuff all over the record, too.
Of course.
That just felt like a big exclamation.
Yeah. What is it for you? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What is it for you in terms of the creative side of things that you can do with an acoustic that you can't do with an electric, and then vice versa?
Man, I don't know. I kind of approach it in the same way, because I really consider myself like kind of a rhythm guitarist. It's just different textures of rhythm, like with an electric guitar, certain electric guitars I can get a little more attack. But with acoustic guitars, I can get a little more like this chunky low end thing to go on. So I'm always trying to like find that middle ground.
Yeah.
And a lot of the tunes on the record actually have archtop guitars on them, which it's like an acoustic guitar but with an electric pickup in it. So it kind of rides that line between acoustic and electric.
Yeah. Well, I was looking up your bio, and I came across your hometown of Purcell, Oklahoma. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Purcell.
Tell me a little bit about your time there and what you remember growing up. I don't know if you were there all the way through high school or whatever, but...
Yeah, I lived there like from the time I was born until I was about 19 or so. And then for a little while, like from the late end of 19 until I was like, I don't know, 22 or so is when I moved to Nashville. So really it was, I didn't know much outside of Purcell until I started touring. Yeah. It's just a small town, like 6,000 people. It's kind of, I grew up thinking that it was like the suburbs, but it's definitely rural. After having traveled a little bit and figured out what other people define as suburbs, I realized like, I didn't really grow up in the suburbs. I grew up in a rural area.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about it is, when I was reading about the history of the town, that as small as it is, it really was like a crossroads for the railroads.
Yeah, that's it. They call it like the birthplace of Oklahoma because it was one of the first railroad stops that they installed in what was then Indian Territory, is what they called it, before it was even a state. So yeah, and like my family, both sides of my family have been in that area for like 5 or 6 generations at least. So have a lot of history there, a lot of family there.
Do you think subconsciously growing up in a small town that had the railroad as a probably constant backdrop, do you think that may have influenced the idea of being a troubadour?
Maybe so. I really, what drew me to music is just the music itself. Like I just loved music growing up. I loved listening to it, finding new music. And then when I got into guitar and realized that it could be like a thing you did for a living, that's all I was really interested in.
Yeah. Did you have to seek it out, or was there people around you, or was it more of just like you had to go find it?
My parents listened to really cool music. I was lucky that my parents listened to like a lot of blues and classic rock and roll and singer-songwriters, and as well as gospel music, and I was playing music in church a lot. So I kind of got it from all over. And then when I was in junior high, I met my, still to this day, bassist. His name's Mike. So then in junior high and high school, I had somebody who was into the blues to play with, you know?
Yeah. Is it one of those things too that, like I grew up in a small town on the Canadian border, and I always try to think about like how wild a journey it's been just from that small starting point. I don't know how often you reflect on how far you've come from Purcell.
Yeah, I think about it a lot. But it's funny, I still mostly feel like the same kid who grew up in Purcell, you know. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I put a lot of miles under my belt. I like to think about, you know, Purcell is like a town, like a lot of small towns, where a lot of people live there their whole life and they never move away. So I like to think about, you know, I've maybe traveled quite a bit more compared to a lot of people.
Well,
you know?
Yeah, but it's one of those things too that I think sometimes the further you get away from those small towns that people grow up in, that you start to see how much you actually had in common with it, maybe. I don't know if you still identify with a lot of it, but do you identify still a lot when you go back?
Yeah, I do. It's funny, being in Nashville, people are very aware of, like, the music business and making it and that. But in Oklahoma, like, people, they ask, like, what do you do? And if you say I'm a musician, they're like, well, what do you do for money? You know, they're like, well, what do you actually do? You know, they think you have to have, a lot of people in Oklahoma just don't realize that you can be a musician for a living, and it's kind of awesome because it makes people appreciate music more, I feel like, because they just get less of it. Like, if you're in Nashville or New York City, there's a show that you'll be into every night of the week, you know, most nights a year that's within 30 minutes. But if you're in Purcell, like, there aren't a lot of shows going on. So when somebody does play shows, they're appreciative.
Was there a moment for you when you knew a song could be whatever you wanted it to be?
Man, growing up, I was, like I said, I was lucky to listen to a bunch of different kinds of music. So I kind of realized pretty early on that songs had all kinds of different uses. You know, I was aware of, like, the spiritual elements of music from growing up in church and participating in, you know, congregational singing and congregational music a lot. And then I was made aware of, like, the history of music through the blues and, like, you know, a lot of the singer-songwriters that my parents listened to when I was growing up wrote weird songs, like Lyle Lovett and Robert Earl Keen.
Yeah.
You know, they write, and John Prine, things like that. They write these kind of idiosyncratic, strange songs, and so I just always thought everything was fair game.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things too where it's beyond musicianship. You embrace the idea of the storyteller, and you have a beat behind it. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's like a million different ways to use a song. You can tell a story, or, you know, I've had valid experiences where I hear the story the whole way through, and I'll play a little movie in my mind, and then other times it's just like a jam, you know. Yeah. And then sometimes that's what you need.
What's the role of the songwriter in the digital age, in the modern era? What's the role of it?
I try not to think about that. There's like something like, I don't know, 10,000 records a day uploaded to Spotify. Like, I don't think that we necessarily are starving for new music, but I do believe in music transcending all the bullshit and, like, transcending the idea of, you know, being a songwriter for a living.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I guess more of like the spiritual side of things, like the idea of the songwriter in such a crazy world of instant gratification and technology.
Yeah. I think that music and especially like live music, like experiencing music in the flesh, not necessarily on a recording, is really integral to the human experience. Like, we need that.
Yeah.
And for a long time, like, we got it through, you know, ritual ritual dancing, in a cave or on the plain somewhere. And then we had churches where, we can go experience live music and do it together. And as, religion is kind of fading in the modern world, I think that musicians are just going to keep filling that role because they have been the whole time. People need that connection.
Well, I feel too that there's been such a revival in the last decade about, I almost feel subconsciously it's like a pushback to technology, that people are really looking for real music. That's why you see so many of these great songwriters and Americana acts that are really breaking through the higher levels.
Yeah, I think it's exciting, and I think that like electronic music can be just as spiritual as anything else. It's humans making it, you know what I mean? Like humans made the technology, and humans made invented the concepts and the algorithms to make the machines make the noises. So for me, like it's all kind of under the same umbrella, but it does need to have like a certain immediate human element.
Yeah. Well, my final question is, I know that you're still very young in your career, but you have been playing for a long time, and you have traveled extensively. What is all those interactions and all those experiences on stage and off? What does that touch you about what it means to be a human being?
One of my favorite quotes from literature is a Kurt Vonnegut quote. He says, "Peculiar travel suggestions are just dancing lessons from God." And I think that's pretty spot on. Like every time we've gotten a weird gig offer on the other side of the world or something, and I take it, like I don't usually regret it. I usually come away, a better person for it. Getting out in the world, into the wild, makes you a little uncomfortable, and I think when you're uncomfortable, you grow.